Hi, everyone. Before we kick off with the episode today, we wanted to record a quick message. We just want to warn our audience that there's pretty extensive conversation in this episode about sexual harassment and even some conversation about assault. So, if that's something that might put you in a bad place or make you uncomfortable, we recommend skipping this episode and coming back to us next month. We love you guys. We want you to feel comfortable. We want you to feel safe. So, we just wanted to give a little warning before we hop on into today's content. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to season 2 of Not So Civil Engineers. I'm your host, Maggie Rodriguez.
And I'm Sam Moriarty.
This week, we're going to be talking about workplace culture, the good, the bad, the ugly. Working in STEM has its own challenges, especially as young women. We're really excited to chat with you guys today and hopefully hear some of your experiences about your workplaces.
So, I think to start, we want to talk about the good parts of workplace cultures. I believe that workplaces can be a really positive and safe space where we can use humor, inclusion, collaboration to really build and foster a really great culture. This can come from a variety of ways. There are these small acts of kindness that our coworkers can do to make us feel part of the team. One example that has held really dear to my heart was last year. My father was in a near fatal car accident, and I took on the responsibility of being his primary caretaker. And I had to take a few months of leave very unexpectedly. There were a lot of projects that I was working on that other people had to pick up the pieces, but I'll never forget how I felt when one day this package just showed up at my parents' front door, filled with all of these snacks and treats and a note from my department. During such a hard time in my life, that truly meant so much to me and just showed how much they care about me, not just as a worker, but as a person. And I think there are some other smaller traditions that I really love about the workplace that can help everyone feel included. My favorite tradition to date is that we have this one birthday balloon, and I don't want to know how we refill it with helium, but that thing has been around for the better part of a year. And sometimes it's looking a little deflated, other times it's a little fuller, but every single time it's someone's birthday, whoever had the most recent birthday will bring it to that person's desk. It's just such a fun, funny tradition to have. And people really track the birthday balloon to figure out who has it. Such a fun thing to do at work that really brings just a little bit of joy to people's day.
That's so fun. I will say, to let the audience kind of in on our process, when Sam and I plan out these episodes, we have planning chats where we say, what do we want to talk about? What's important for either of us to cover so that we can write it down and make sure we don't miss anything. And this episode was kind of tough to plan. I told Sam, you're going to have to do a lot of the heavy listing on the good section because not only being a young woman in STEM, but specifically a young woman who's worked most of my career in the construction industry, there hasn't been a ton of standout good culture in the jobs that I've had. My job now is probably the least toxic that I've had. I think that people where I work now are more aware, but some places I've worked in the past have been really, really toxic. There's been a lot of toxic culture and toxic habits that they don't change. Coming up with examples of my good workplaces was a little challenging. I have a few distinct memories of things that made me feel more like part of the team at places where I've worked. The most significant one for me was when I was at my job in North Carolina. I never really had close friends who I worked with as construction managers because I worked with pretty much all like middle-aged or older men. So we weren't hanging out outside of work. We weren't like texting. That's just not how it really was. When I had really hard times, people kind of stepped in as comforters. And it can be hard to be vulnerable, especially when you're a young woman and you want to be seen as strong and competent and independent. Specifically, only like 3 months into having that job. And most of that time was during the part of COVID where everyone was remote. So I really had not spent very long with anyone. My dad had a stroke and ended up dying. I was at work when I found out that he'd had a stroke and that he was going to die. I went into my boss's office and just cried. because I had to tell him. And of course, that kind of had its good and its bad because word didn't spread, like it wasn't gossip, but the other supervisors, he informed them that I was going to be remote because my dad was dying. That meant that when I returned, they like each stopped by my office to like talk to me about how my dad died. And I was like, listen, I'm back here. I'm hanging on by a thread. Like, I understand that you guys are trying to be thoughtful. One of them came in, he was having his own personal crisis because he asked me how old my dad was, realized he was only 2 years younger, and then started talking to me about how, like, he was nervous that something like that was going to happen to him. And I was just, like, not in the place to, like, have that conversation.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, no, definitely wrong place, wrong time. I wouldn't say that was a great experience in general, but having people very clearly show that they care makes a difference. I didn't make any friends through that experience. I didn't start hanging out with my boss outside of work because he was like thoughtful when my dad died. It helps you feel understood when people are empathetic about things you're going through. I had a couple instances where I had to have those vulnerable moments. I never felt like it isolated me. I never felt like it made me seem weak. I always felt like it somehow connected me with the humanity of the people that I was talking to because
Mhm.
you kind of realize that everybody's gone through those things.
Maggie, I know that was such a difficult part of your life, and there was a lot of emotions and a lot of grief that you were dealing with. At the end of the day, we're all human. We do have that empathy or are capable of that empathy and kind of giving each other space when we need it. I think about my job right now, where I have a really great leadership team that also allows me to be vulnerable. Last episode, we had talked about signs of burnout. I've figured out mine. Okay. Incredibly emotional. I am weepy at everything. Last week, I cried once every hour for 6 of the 8 hours in the workday. It was not good. And both of my bosses were in, and they would take turns coming in, like popping their head in and be like, just checking on you. Are you?
Hey,
Hey.
you okay? Oh, Sam.
And it was bad. It was bad. And they're like, take a break this weekend. Don't think about work at
Let
all.
loose.
Let loose. Maybe they were empathetic. I think they were worried about me more than anything.
It was really pity.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I do call them my work dads or
oh yeah.
I call them my work dads
And
for a
like
reason.
that's absolutely the vibe that I got at my old job. Like I was never gonna be pals. I was never gonna be besties with all of like older men that I worked with, but a lot of times like there were strong dad vibes.
So, with that strong dad vibe in mind, did your old job have any sort of mandated outings or team building? What did that look like for you?
Both in North Carolina and in Italy, we were a government job. So you can't have like mandatory events with alcohol. There are a lot of rules surrounding alcohol. So any of our command events, there was no alcohol. We would have things like picnics and stuff like that. I actually struggled at those because I didn't really fit in. Basically, it sounds so pathetic, but like at any event my command had, there were always like tables of like eight, and I never really knew where to go. I would always get there early and take my own table to see like who would sit with me because all of the construction managers would have their groups, they would sit together. And then there was a group of women who were the contract specialists who did a lot of the documentation and stuff. They were always very intentional about having a table for like the contract specialists and making sure that there was a spot for all of them. I understood that because they were a separate office. They were thinking of everybody in their office. So, like, I didn't really fit in anywhere. I felt like the CMs were assuming that I was going to sit with the other women, and the other women were focused on their office and, like, not really thinking of me. So, I always felt like I just didn't really have a place. But I pushed to try to belong. I was on the social committee. In Italy, I started a social committee for my command. I actually last week was talking to my coworker Jose about people don't know each other and it causes more conflict because when you read an email and you already think it could have had a bad tone and you don't know who's on the other end of it, it gets worse.
Unfortunately, I think people always think negatively, especially when it comes to emails.
Yeah, in written communication, like people assume the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't know the person on the other side, it's even worse because you don't have the context. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask my boss's boss about putting together a Thanksgiving potluck. And then later in the day, he and I were talking, and basically, yet again, I'm going to be asking for permission to start a social committee. So there will be some of that now. There are
Mm-hmm.
a lot more young people where I work now than there were at my old job. But no, I have not had a ton of that. The only things we had were during work hours, very sterile, kind of more like the potluck lunch
Mm-hmm. Like
situation where you're all
luncheon
just like
learn.
in the conference room. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't relate. I have been the party planning committee chair for every single job I've ever had, even going back to college when I was working in the chem stock room. I think I just gravitate towards event planning. It's a labor of love, but I was more or less voluntold that I would be the head of the party planning committee for my current department, which has also expanded and has over 200 people with the geography that covers the entire state of Massachusetts. So, trying to plan events for that massive group of people, I'm not going to get everyone, I know that, but trying to make smaller events and then scale them across. We had a week this month for Wellness Week. I got an email from my executive director. He said, hey, the academic medical centers want to designate this week as a no meetings week. So please cancel all of your regularly scheduled meetings. This is really a time for you to connect with your teams, to catch up on work. He's like, yeah, I'm thinking one of the days I want to do a walk. The man is a marathoner. Okay. He's done probably half a dozen marathons at this point, could be more. Don't know. He was like, yeah, I want to do like an end of day walk between the two academic medical centers and meet in the middle of the Charles River. And then once we get there, maybe people want to go for a run. So then it got the wheels turning. We're like, what if we made this a whole wellness week where we planned activities across all the different campuses and did some virtually so that the other offsites could attend? It was good.
I can't imagine someone telling me I should go for a run at work.
Well, okay, I we balance though. We balance. We're like, all right, 3 to 5, walk, people meet in the park. They can hang out, play soccer, whatever. But at 5 o'clock, we're walking to the bar. And people who don't want to go on the walk come meet us at the bar at 5. Balance. One other team tradition from my last job that I think about every single week is that I used to have a coworker that every Friday he would play some like group called the Nightcrawlers in Riton, and it's called Friday. This Friday song is like, it's Friday, then it's Saturday, Sunday. And he would play that nonstop every single Friday, especially the last hour of the day where we would have a mandatory team cleaning session. He's blasting that song on his computer, like so much so that while I was at that job, he had to switch out his speakers twice because he was blasting it every week.
Blew out his speakers.
And now it's a song like every Friday in my head. I'm like, it's Friday. And that's the only lyric, really. It's just that. I'll put it on the Instagram.
Just make it our story on a Friday.
I'm gonna post it every Friday now.
Oh, perfect. Story. Yeah. It's like 60 times.
Oh.
So I really appreciate that you have had so much of the good to talk about today. And I really liked hearing about it because I enjoy hearing about people who have healthier work environments. However, as I said, workplace culture, especially in STEM fields, can be pretty difficult to navigate as a woman. So I want to dive into some of the norms that have made us struggle to feel comfortable in our teams or really like we're a genuine part of the team. So something that I noticed, especially at my first job out of college, was that there was a significant rewarding of overwork. There were a lot of people who would brag about how many hours they worked, brag about how little they slept, or how many days they worked. Like, I'm pulling 80-hour weeks. Like, Dude, we're all making the same salary. I specifically have a memory of being in a staff meeting and our project executive said something along the lines of, I'm always seeing the same field engineers here on Saturdays, and I think we need to switch up who's here. And I knew that I was one of the people who was not there on Saturdays. But part of the reason I wasn't there on Saturdays is because I was on like a different scope of work than they were, and my work was done. There was no need for me to be there on Saturday. It felt like an us versus them. It felt like pitting people against each other. And I mean, corporations have a vested interest in pitting you against each other because if people are pushing and pushing to do more and more to be better than the person next to them, then you get the productivity out of it for no more money.
Mm-hmm.
It can create a very, very toxic, unhealthy, competitive workplace. I do think that competition is important. I think that having some sort of striving to be better is important in the workplace. Like, I always want to strive to be better, but not to the extent that it's about waiting until someone leaves to leave after them and things like that that are just so unimportant.
Right. I think part of it is having pride in your work and pride in your career and that sort of self motivation, determination. But to the point around rewarding of overwork or people bragging, I will be honest and say that is something that I used to be guilty of. And it was someone in my leadership team who had made a comment to say, I feel like if someone on my team is overworking, is that more so issues with their time management that they feel that they need to work overtime to get what they need done? And it was kind of a wake up call for me because I was working overtime to put myself ahead, not because I was late on deliverables, but I was like, I have time at the end of the day. I'll just stay an extra hour, 2 hours late and keep working because I'm in the zone right now. Someone in my leadership team saying that was definitely a hard pill to swallow. I'm like, oh my God, I'm one of those people. People must think I'm not getting stuff done. So I've been more conscious about leaving at the end of the day or getting to work on time instead of an hour early and then stay an hour late. I'm like, there's just no need. Also, thinking about burnout, that was behavior I needed to stop for my mental health. But it's really hard when you are thinking about competition and comparing yourself to your peers and how much they are getting done. I know for me, it was difficult at first to close the laptop and get out at 5.
It's funny you mentioned the time management because I remember when I was in North Carolina, I had this one coworker who constantly charged overtime and was talking about how much he worked. And I was like, dude, what do you have to do that's taking you that long? We have the same job, we just have different projects. Like, what is going on that you're working so much? I like never understood what he actually did with his time. And that was kind of the general consensus was like, what is this dude doing? Is he just twiddling his thumbs all day? Part of the perception was, does he just want the overtime pay?
Even on my teams now, if I'm noticing a trend in them falling behind, I'll allocate overtime for the team to get that work done. But I'm very strict and I give a certain number of time, whether it's you have 6 hours of overtime a week that you can spread across the entire team. I think by putting time limits on it, it forces people to be more productive because they know that that's all that they're going to get. The expectation is if I'm giving this to them, they have to get the work done. That is the expectation. Something I've also noticed in the workplace is different communication styles between men and women, and specifically men interrupting women when they're speaking or rewording something that was already said and trying to make it seem like it was their own idea. It's something that I experience in my role. And recently I was leading a meeting and it was majority men. We've started using the hand raise function on Teams. There was a moment where there were a couple of my male colleagues that were going back and forth, but my female colleague had had her hand up for a while. So I sort of redirected the conversation. I let them finish their sentence. I was like, yeah, good point. Hannah, I know you've had your hand up for a while. Like, what did you want to bring to the table? I think being very intentional about that and having that redirection and focusing on my fellow female colleagues makes them feel seen and hopefully makes a point to my male colleagues, shh, wait your turn.
I have definitely noticed more men interrupting each other or seemingly feeling like what they have to say is so important that it simply cannot wait. I was in a meeting a couple months ago and something happened that was so simple, but it was like a master class in how to deal with someone interrupting you. It was so notable to me that I like came home and told my husband about it, and I've mentioned it to multiple people. I was in a meeting with a bunch of associate directors and their director, and there was a lot of conversation happening, a lot of like passionate conversation about how to handle something. One of them just kept interrupting, and his supervisor, the director, was talking, and this associate director interrupted him, and he just said, "Let me finish," and kept going. It was so straightforward. It was so to the point. It wasn't like, sorry, just hold on a second and then I'll let you finish. Let me finish. And then he kept talking. Can I say that I think that would be taken the same way if a woman said it? No.
That was going to be my
But
question.
yeah, I don't know. It depends on, I think, the person receiving. But it was just so clear. There wasn't really anything in it that you can like twist. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
It's
right.
not like, hey, I'm talking here or anything like that where it like
Right. It's
comes
not it's
across.
not me, like there's no emotion in it. It's
Hmm.
just let me finish.
Let me finish. Yeah, I really liked that. And so I'm keeping that one in my back pocket. I will say I tend to be a little passive aggressive when people interrupt me at work. And I just keep talking and I just get louder. I am going to actually finish my sentence.
I think sometimes I interrupt men or people. And I know it's not a great habit to have, but I'm glad that I have the self confidence to do it.
I'm so proud of you, Sam, for adopting these toxic male habits.
I I'm the
No,
toxic
yeah, I'm also an
workplace.
interrupter, as I'm sure people know from listening to us talk to each other for hours. We're both interrupters. Part of it, I think, is just a confidence thing. Like when you think that what you have to say is really good, like it's gonna burst out of you, whether someone else is talking or not.
What is that SpongeBob quote? I lost something once.
Uh, I also think that as women, we can sometimes try to adopt these mannerisms consciously or even subconsciously in order to fit in our workplaces. We act more like one of the guys. It can feel a little bit inauthentic because maybe you'll feel a little bit more included, but you might not feel like they actually know you or that you are included as a person because it's not really you. It's like the persona that you've used at work is well liked. I think I fell into that trap a little bit at my first job after school. I like tried really hard to be one of the guys and it just didn't really work. I think I learned from that. I've definitely changed from that, I think. I do like have a lot of male friends. I still have close male friends from college. I still have close male friends from some jobs that I've had. So I'm not like other girls. No, I'm just kidding. I do think that I get along well with men. I think that I've had to based on where we went to school and where I've had jobs. But sometimes I do wonder if I went into a different career, if there would be like a different version of me, even in just my life outside of work. Like if I would have put more attention into the more feminine parts of myself
Mm.
that have kind of become stifled over the past decade.
That's a really great point. You are a product of your environment. So it's not surprising. I think also going to a small STEM school that was predominantly male, there were some attributes that we had to pick up to stay with the pack and not fall behind in our careers, in our academic achievements, in our personal achievements as well.
We had to start interrupting people.
We had to.
We had
We had
to.
no other
No
choice.
choice.
And thinking of that, right? The theory that women have to change themselves to assimilate more with like a male dominated culture, it makes me think of the larger power dynamics at play, not only between women and men, but also thinking about generations and how there's this sense with younger generations of they don't know what they're talking about, or they haven't had this experience yet. Or
Hmm.
we had this more toxic saying of the culture hasn't brought you down yet. You haven't been here long enough to really see the true colors.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to that rhetoric. I try to make people understand that I do have experience. People should take me seriously, and what I say does have some merit and should be given credit. When I think about a specific example around power dynamic with men and women, I think about before my company adopted the use of some of these AI tools like Copilot, I was the one that was the de facto note taker. And again, I don't know if that's because I'm a very type A, very organized person, or is it because that is a traditional, stereotypical woman role within a workplace? And that's a question
Yeah.
that I still struggle with.
Yeah, we were talking about party planning committees, social committees earlier. The first time I was voluntold to be on a social committee at my work in North Carolina, they wanted a representative from the field office I was in. And they just thought I would be a perfect fit. I said, "Why is that?" And I did ask them because I'm Maggie. My name's Maggie.
And I
Was
love confrontation.
Hi, I'm Maggie and I love fighting older men. I love a conflict with a middle-aged man. But I said, "Why is that?" They said, "Well, we think you really care about the office culture." I said, "Why?" Think about the fact that I am the only woman in this office and look inward and consider if that is why you think that I would be great on a party planning committee. Of course, nobody self reflected. They said, "Oh, yeah, okay, Maggie, go plan a party." And I did. But, and yet here I am. And I've been making social committees ever since. And right now, in the midst of trying to make one with my male coworker, I was like, let's get some reps from Upper Science Hill. Let's get some reps from Med. Who can you think of that would be a good fit? Guess what's come out of his mouth?
All woman.
All women. Yes. And so I am trying. Sadly, he knows everybody way better than I do. But I'm like, we gotta get another man in here. Like, we gotta think of some man who cares about the culture of the office.
And I like think about this on a evolutionary level, and the fact that females have always been the ones that have created community. And now we just see it with modern day terms like party planning committee chair.
Yeah. You used to gather berries. Now I make a Canva flyer for a potluck.
Now I'm gathering acceptances to my Outlook invites.
Yes. So there's kind of an elephant in the room that I think I've been skirting around in terms of bad parts of office culture of working in STEM, and that's sexual harassment. Sexual harassment in the workplace is very real. And I know we all have to do those very lame annual trainings where the situations are so fake and so exaggerated. And it's like, this would never happen. There are a lot of versions of sexual harassment that do happen frequently. And sadly, there are so many that are more subtle, but there are a lot that are overt harassment that people would say that would never happen. And it absolutely does. And if I can offer a piece of advice to anybody out there who experiences any sort of harassment, the gray area is not a gray area. If somebody says something that makes you uncomfortable, it's harassment. Document it as well as you can. Something I've done in the past when somebody said something inappropriate to me was I wrote, because I was kind of in shock at the moment that they said it. I'm just going to say it. A man who was old enough to be my dad was like, "I couldn't believe that you were my construction manager when they introduced us." And I was like, "Oh, because I'm young?" Like, I was only like 24 at the time. But no, he was like, "Yeah, I was talking to this other guy." And I was like, "She's so hot." And I just kind of froze up in the moment because I was like, that can't be real. That can't be what I just heard. So I just kind of was like, huh, huh. Then like went back to my office and I was like, what? Did that really just happen? So what I did was I wrote him an email and I said, "Earlier you said to me," and I wrote in quotes what he said. And I said, "That was not appropriate. Please don't speak to me like that ever again." He didn't respond to that. I never reported him because after that, like he totally avoided me, which was fine by me, but we were assigned to a project together where like we should have been able to collaborate. And I didn't really feel like reporting him for it. I felt like I made enough of a point. Luckily, he didn't hurt me, harm me in any way. It was just really awkward. So I felt like nipping it in the bud and addressing it and seeing a change was enough for me. However, there was definitely a little bit of like social retaliation there because not
Mm,
only did he start ignoring me, but the story he told me, there was another engineering technician involved who like had been part of the conversation. And that guy was my engineering technician on a different project. And so I never knew if he turned around and went and told that guy, like, hey, Maggie's uh she's taking this way too serious. She's gonna report me just because I gave her a compliment, you know.
yeah.
There's a form of social retaliation where even if it's not that he's my supervisor and he's not going to give me a promotion because of this or something like that, there is still a very real aspect of retaliation for facing and confronting these things.
And that's where I feel like I could give some advice. I think, like, one, bravo to you for calling out that behavior immediately. I always want to recommend report to HR. A majority of companies and HR policies have a non retaliation clause. And that can be super helpful for when you have that situation, like you were just explaining, where people are being non responsive and therefore not really performing their job duties. You don't necessarily have to tell your supervisor or manager. There are plenty of options or opportunities to go straight to HR. Everything there is confidential. And they'll loop in your leadership as needed if there is sort of a ongoing investigation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the hard part about retaliation when it's not obvious is that it's hard to prove and it's hard to fix. Because if you kind of just turn into an outcast because people are afraid to talk to you because you're too sensitive. There are air quotes around that for anyone who's only listening to this and not watching it. If people view you as too sensitive, you can't say anything to her, then it's not easy to prove that it's retaliation. Let me tie this story up with a nice bow. I did eventually tell someone in my leadership what was happening because this was in 2020. The Black Lives Matter movement was really big, and there was a lot of focus around giving people the space to speak on things. The captain of my command started holding these listening sessions, bringing up topics like harassment and alienation. The topic of sexual harassment came up. When the question was asked, like, is there anything like that here? A lot of people were saying, no, no, we've never seen anything inappropriate. We've never seen anything, nothing bad. Everyone's like a family. And finally, I like raised my hand and I was like, I don't think it's common, but this does happen here. And everybody was like, oh, like there was genuine shock in some people's faces. I was very vague, but said, you know, I've had someone in our command say something really inappropriate to me and I addressed it on my own. But there are situations where that wouldn't have been a comfortable thing to do. And constantly having people say, this doesn't happen here, this doesn't happen here, is very invalidating.
Yes, absolutely. And it makes me think how many weren't reported
Hmm.
or you guys weren't given the platform to be vulnerable and speak openly and freely about the experiences that you've had.
Because, like I said, there's a lot of harassment that isn't super overt. It's not someone walking up to you and saying, I'm so glad you're on my team. You're super hot. It's more like the slightly inappropriate things where you're like, is this just because we're becoming friendly? Or is this because you're harassing me? And constantly having people feed to you, this doesn't happen here. We're all like a family. We all get along super well. No one would ever say anything inappropriate to each other, makes you even less likely to really think that those gray area kind of subtle statements are problematic and are something that you should address.
Yeah.
But after that listening session, the guy who harassed me, his supervisor came up to me and said, I think I know who this is about. Starting Monday, he will not be on your team anymore. He was removed. But I was like, part of the problem is that if you know who that was about,
That's a
why is he
problem.
here?
Right. That's a problem. Thinking about that, if it was already a known pattern, why wasn't something done about it sooner? I had a experience where I was at a training facility and I was verbally and physically assaulted and groped. I was brand new to the company after it happened. I was in a state of shock. And I also knew that I didn't want there to be any waves. I didn't want there to be any reason why my employer would rescind my offer before officially starting. So I kept very quiet and I went throughout the rest of the training on edge, not hanging out with anyone, really scared to see this person while we were wrapping up training. Did my best to get to the airport super early, get on my flight, and leave. And it wasn't until about a year later, where I was getting ready to go to my first manufacturer training, that I had a full blown panic attack and told my boss, I don't think I'm ready to go. And she was like, well, tell me about this. Like, what's going on? And I told her the past experience. And she was like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you told me. Let's do something about this. And she kind of talked me through the process. I went to HR. Come to find out, this guy already had two other strikes against him for verbally harassing nurses in the hospital. He was immediately terminated. And it was so nice to feel validated by my boss, knowing that the process does work. But I also felt an immense amount of sadness and guilt for not bringing it up sooner, because I just think about all the other women that this guy interacted with where he was so uncomfortably rude. And like, yeah, there were two strikes against him, but how many of those instances went unreported?
Mm-hmm.
So there is definitely power in using your voice and calling out unacceptable behavior.
Oh, Sam, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm really proud of you for speaking up. You've never told me that before.
It was a really uncomfortable time, obviously, but I feel a lot stronger. And I feel like I'm also able to better advocate for the women on my team now. And I
Mm-hmm.
make sure to create that culture where it's a safe space and any one of my team members can come to me if they ever feel uncomfortable about anything. So there's a gray area that I want to talk about next, and that would be the awkward parts of the job, specifically around people and all the different backgrounds and experiences they have. I feel that people skills, especially in the STEM field, are not always strong. So let's talk about some scenarios where we may experience some social weirdness and how we work through them.
I don't know what you could possibly mean by that. Engineers, such social butterflies.
So cool, so calm, so
So
collected.
cool. Always know what the right thing is to say. That's funny you say that. There's a lot of awkward dancing around at work, not even having to do with awkward people. Just about what do you talk about, especially if you're new at a job? What do you talk about? Small talk, oh, the weather, let's talk about work, kind of the bridge into personal life. How does that happen? When do you know if somebody actually wants to be friends or if they're just being polite? It's hard. It can be
Mhm.
really awkward and it can be really difficult to know. There's a lot when you start working somewhere or even a while into working somewhere where even if you're at a happy hour or something like that, everyone's just talking about the work. Everyone's talking about projects. How do you make that switch from talking about just work to talking about a little bit more of your personal life to feel a little bit more connected with the people you work with? I feel like it all starts off with being open. It can be hard for some people. I recognize that some people are introverted, some people are shy. My advice for that is don't be. Just kidding. But for real, my advice for people who are shy or introverted is that everyone feels awkward about talking to people. Even people who are so confident and so outgoing have the thought in the back of their mind of like, what if I come off as weird? The only thing that's different between somebody who's super introverted and somebody who's not is that the person who is not and comes off super confident is like, what if they think I'm weird? Who cares? Whereas someone who takes that grain of doubt in their mind and uses it to not ever take the chance is so afraid of people thinking they're weird or being annoying or being awkward that they never take the chance.
Mhm.
But if you can think back to the times in your life where somebody has come up and talked to you, or has made small talk, has told you a story from their personal life, even though they're a coworker, I doubt you ever have thought, oh, they're super weird. I really wish they hadn't told me that. It's probably not something that's going to happen. And I think that we're all way more critical of ourselves than other people are of us. Try to take the chance. Try to slip in a story about your personal life, a story about your family life, a story about something you did over the weekend. Try to see where it goes because you might end up making friends. You might end up having a conversation that's just a little bit more personal than you would have otherwise. Everybody has a life outside of work, everybody enjoys their life outside of work. So, just try bringing it up or try asking another person a question. People love talking about themselves. We've talked about this before. It's our hint for job interviews and it's our hint for making friends in the workplace. People love to talk about themselves. So if your coworker is talking about the weather's supposed to be great this weekend for, let's say, Halloween, the weather's supposed to be great for Halloween, say, oh, do you have any kids? Are they going trick or treating?
Or do you
Um,
have fun Halloween
do you have
plans?
fun plans? Are you dressing up? Anything like that? And obviously, I've got Halloween on the brain. I don't know why. It already happened. It's like a while back now at this point. My daughter won't stop talking about it. That must be why. She's like very into Halloween now. She's like,
Love
I'm going
that.
to dress up again. I'm like, yeah, next year.
In
Like, it's not
365
coming up
days.
again tomorrow. We're not going door to door again. I know it was like very thrilling. But just try to silence that inner critic. Try to say,
Mhm.
okay, and what if they do think I'm weird? Such is life, you know? Like there have been a lot of people out there who like maybe are not their cup of tea and life goes on.
Yep. I always love using that black cat golden retriever metaphor. I think my advice to introverts is go find yourself the golden retriever. Okay. The super extroverted people at work want to be friends with everyone. That is usually a fact.
Mhm.
So send them an email and be like, hey, want to pick your brain about, I don't know, some like shared task or like thing that they might be working on. Do you want to get lunch or do you want to go get a coffee? And then that's the beginning of a beautiful
A
friendship.
beautiful, a beautiful butterfly.
A beautiful butterfly. On that note of friendships, let's talk about when they get to be a little bit more. Like, how do you navigate office crushes? And if you are in a group where you are very friendly and there's a lot of overlap of personal lives, work lives, how do you have boundaries and like ethical gossip?
Oh,
I will be the first to say I don't know if I believe in ethical gossip. I think it's caused a lot of
my
a
gossip
lot of
is ethically sourced.
I'll be the first to say that I'm not sure that ethical gossip exists. I think that gossip in a workplace can really take it from being awkward to toxic very, very quickly. I think we can be respectful of our coworkers and of our colleagues without crossing the lines and talking about things that might be going on in their personal lives. So that's something I would tread very carefully and very lightly through if you are in a workplace where you are friends and spend a lot of time outside of the workplace together, which is crazy because we literally spend 40 hours a week with these people, which is more than we spend with our families. But
Yeah, Sam, get back to the juicy stuff, please.
oh, the
We would like
navigating.
to return to office crushes. I would really like to hear your advice on that. Let me tell everybody, Sam's going to be covering this segment completely. I don't have the extensive experience that she has with office crushes and office relationships. So, Sam,
Okay, okay. Well, my partner happens to be my coworker.
there it is.
There it is. There it is.
Is he there
Yeah, he's
this
there.
time?
he's
Ah, come say hi,
he's
please.
always there.
Wave to the
Come,
camera.
come say hi. Wave to the camera.
Tell him I say hi. He's not going to be able to hear me. Hi. Boyfriend reveal.
Boyfriend. But yes, my partner also happens to be my coworker. It did not start out like this. We did not come from other jobs and start working together. This was something that over years of friendship, we went from just being coworkers to being friends to eventually developing feelings for each other. And I would say that being the type A personalities that we are, by the freaking book. There was not going to be any source of air quote ethical gossip about us. All right. We kept things very much on the down low for the first couple months that we had started going on dates. Although, in the back of my mind, I was like, we're going to be found out because on two separate occasions of us leaving work together, we ran into another one of our coworkers. And after the second time, I was like, he knows. He knows
Oh, it
something.
was the
He's
same
gonna
guy both
it was
times?
the same guy both times. I was like, he knows. He's gonna rat us out to everyone. He didn't. Like men, very oblivious.
He
We
said,
got
I'm so glad they have such a
he was
beautiful
like
friendship.
he was like, oh, they must be meeting up with other people. It definitely worked out because we told HR first. We told HR before any of our friends. That's how like by the book we were. We wanted to go to HR to get some clarity about like our work situation and make sure that there weren't any conflicts of interest, as well as just disclose it from the get-go so that if it did come up in later conversations, which it did when my department organization went through a really big shakeup earlier this year, that was brought up. And just to set the record straight. And my HR person at the time, love her. She was like, this is nothing. And we're like, okay, what do we do now? And she was like, go tell your bosses, which is literally my worst nightmare come true.
Yeah.
Want to talk about awkward? That was it. The most awkward conversation I've ever had with my boss. He thought I was quitting at first. I was like, so I have something I want to talk to you about. He was like, if you're quitting, get out of my office. Like he was already so like
You're like,
burnt
no, I
out.
just have a boyfriend.
No. I was like, I want to disclose a workplace relationship. He was like, who and who? I'm like, me. Me.
Duh.
And Ian. And but then he was like, oh, I hope it's going well. I'm like, I don't think I'd be telling you if it wasn't.
We're on the rocks, Kevin.
Yeah, I want your relationship
I
advice.
want your advice.
I'm like, you've been married for at least a decade now. Like, you've got to. No, no. Yeah, so that was my experience. And then, like, what Ian and I did was we set up one-on-ones with all of our coworkers that we're friends with. And we're like, let's just tell them and get their reactions. And honestly, it was the best thing ever. There are some people that we wanted to tell together.
You used valuable work hours for this.
What, 5 minutes? Be like,
You said, let me remind you, supervisors, 10 hours max overtime total this month. Now get in my office for your one-on-one. This is so
super
important.
And the range of reactions I got were okay to like people jaw dropped asking for all the details, like, when did it start? I'm like, what? You guys are dating? But overall, everything was very positive.
I hope everyone knew that I knew. Hi, everyone. I knew. I just feel like that's important. Anyone who's listening to this, I knew before you.
Yeah, that's very
I knew.
true. That's very
Yeah,
true.
I knew because I actually knew after you had your Friendsgiving for work. You sent me the
Oh
group
my
picture and then you were
God.
like, Maggie, one of my coworkers is cute. And I think we were flirting. So I win.
We were flirting, but then I got scared and I invited one of our other coworkers out to the bar with us after that because I didn't want to be alone with him. It
Keep
was
that
too new.
man
It was
away
too
from
scary.
me.
And now look, he's
And
literally
now
in
he's
my house.
on your couch.
He's on my couch. Yep. Yep.
Do you need help?
Blink.
Blink twice if you need help.
Oh,
The hard part about doing the right way and like going to HR is that it forces you to define the relationship and you both have to agree to go to HR. I remember you were afraid to like bring it up to him. Obviously, it was good you did, but it would be tricky in some situations if people weren't at the same
weren't aligned
place.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah, to be like, hey, we should talk to HR about this. And for them to be like, I thought we were just having fun.
That would be a situation that I don't
That'd be
think I
really
would have
awkward.
recovered. Yeah, I would have been devastated if that were
Well,
the
I mean, the
case.
relationship wouldn't recover from it. That's for
Right.
sure.
That's true. That's very
Yeah.
true. Yeah. So I was very thankful that we were aligned on that, even though I was very scared to like have the conversation. It felt really good coming out of it and be like, yeah, we're diving in. We're doing this. We're
Yeah.
together. And now I have coworkers that won't stop asking about when we're getting married, which borders on like the inappropriate like
You should
comments.
start you should start giving them a little piece of paper that says that they get a strike. Strike one.
Strike one, get up
Inappropriate
to strike
question.
three, and you're not invited anymore. So
So workplace culture obviously has its good, its bad, it's ugly, it's awkward, all of the above. It has the full spectrum. It's also easy to feel like your workplace's culture just kind of is what it is and won't change and you can't really impact it. But everything we do has the potential to change culture and to impact the people and environment around us. And there are a bunch of methods I can think of off the top of my head to make small changes in your workplace culture that I think we should talk about.
I think the first is just around intentionality in your communication, having a level of empathy in everything that you communicate, and whether that's written communication or verbal communication. Also, speaking with clarity and with appropriate tone also make a huge difference between a very safe space to a very hostile space.
Another thing is choosing your battles. Part of that is knowing your team. If someone you work with is having a really bad day and is kind of snippy and is irritable, and you have something that they say in a meeting that you disagree with, maybe just save it for the next progress meeting for another day, for another time where you can diffuse them a little bit and then present what you have to say in a more calm, better way that won't potentially cause a confrontation in a meeting. Also, if your boss is prepping for a meeting and you're sitting in on a meeting that they're running and they say something that's wrong, like a fact, point it out to them after. You don't want to sit in an important meeting and be like, hey, actually, that's wrong. You got to know when it's appropriate, when it's your place to say those kinds of things. There are, of course, times when there's a critical piece of information that's wrong. You got to correct it. But if it's a little thing, it doesn't make you look better to correct things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that, especially with young professionals who are new to the working environment, there's an idea that being right factually will make you look good. But in certain situations, it actually doesn't make you look good. It doesn't leave a good impression of you.
And I think the same can be said reversal of young leaders or people just coming into leadership. If someone on your team who spent a lot of time working on something and is presenting to a group, and maybe there's a piece of information wrong, have the conversation after, because that is such a toxic manager trait to punish in public rather than in private.
Especially if that person's nervous, that's only going to make it worse. And
Mm-hmm.
they can always, after the fact, if they're sending out their presentation materials or something, say, hey, correction on slide 6, one of my statistics was wrong. Something like that, where they can then choose how to deliver that there was a factual inaccuracy in the things that they said instead of forcing them into that in the moment.
I think another tactic around really helping the workplace environment is being playful when it comes to professionalism. I think there's a way to show personality and show competence at the same time. I'm someone who definitely like borders on the silly, where I try to be as authentic as possible. And I think I just have a naturally goofy personality. And I'm also super emotional. I'm very comfortable being vulnerable at work, but I also have done a lot of things to show that I'm very competent, know what I'm doing, know what I'm talking about. That instills a lot of trust for me in the team, and also shows that I'm someone who's reliable and also someone who's a safe space to come and talk to if there is something in their personal life that's going on and maybe they just need an ear to listen.
And the last thing that I have for this segment is to lead by example. Try to quietly influence the culture around you. Lead by example in your professionalism, lead by example in the boundaries that you have with talking about the appropriate parts of personal life.
Being mindful of when and where you're bringing up the toxic parts of your workplace. I think, to your point, leading by example, lead by trying to change some of that behavior and culture yourself. And I think people will follow suit versus, sorry, new hire, this is this really awful thing that happens in our department. And it just is what it
Live
is.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I want to talk about before we close that is a really important part of changing culture is confrontation. There are a lot of people, especially people who are older, set in their ways, who are the people in a workplace who get the treatment of like, oh, well, yeah, that's just how they are. And anything they say that's inappropriate, off color, is just like people roll their eyes and they're just like, you gotta stop saying stuff like that. But nobody ever actually does anything about it. To be the person who sits them down and says, you're not being professional, what you're doing is inappropriate, I think can have a very real impact. I did that once with one of the supervisors in my office because he would constantly make all of these weird comments about gender, about sexual expression, about race. He was a retired Marine and he was close to retirement from his job. And everybody was just like, oh, you know him, he's a Marine. They are always like that. He's gonna retire soon. And I was like, okay, but why can't the years left until his retirement be better? So I sat him down one day and I said, the comments you make about women are really harmful. You have a wife and you have a daughter. How would you feel if somebody made these comments about them? And it was always that gray area. Some of my old Marine buddies used to say XYZ instead of the like, I believe XYZ. So it was
Mm-hmm.
that like gray area where there's the plausible deniability. But when you sit somebody down and you say the way that you talk about people is not appropriate, there's not much for them to say that makes them feel better about how they're talking. I was in the South with the good old boys club, and I do still think that I made an impact. I like to think so, at least. Or maybe it was just that side of me that loves to fight with older men. Either way, it is important to sometimes confront the issue head on.
I think one of the themes that I've been noticing is the power of using your voice in the workplace to make a change, to call things out, to even start positive things and positive traditions. We've covered a lot today. And in closing, workplaces are dynamic. There's going to be a mix of the good, the bad, the awkward. At the end of the day, just always know that your voice, your action can really make a difference. And that is all we have for you today. So thank you again for tuning in to Not So Civil Engineers. Make sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Please follow us on Spotify. Every time I post an episode, Spotify says other podcasts like yours have about twice the followers. And I say, okay, you, Spotify. Thanks. And then it says, encourage your listeners to follow. So please follow us.
Please follow us.
If you want to join the podcast, also, if you want a guest, email us at notSoCivilEngineers@gmail.com.
And follow us on Instagram as well at Not So Civil Pod.
Yes, we post some funny stuff. There's some really funny tidbits on there.
And make sure to tune in next time where we talk about representation in STEM, why it matters to see people who look like you, and how we can lift others up. Thank you again for tuning in.
We'll talk to you all again soon. And remember, keep it civil.
At least a little.
Bye.
Bye.